Admiral, glad to have you with us tonight, my friends. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate the introduction. I'm Joe Sestak, and may I ask how many people have heard me speak before? Oh, that many. I mean, for me, that's great. I've been to Story County twice. So then what I'll do, if it's acceptable to you, I'll just do a very short view over of me for about 5 minutes. And if you didn't mind, I'd love to take the last 15 for questions and answers. Is that acceptable? Thank you. Look, I tell people that I wore the cloth of our country for 31 years, in war and in peace. I was on the ground just after Afghanistan began, heading the Navy's Strategic Anti-Terrorism Unit for a very brief period before I came out and took command of an aircraft carrier battle group for the strikes against the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. But in peace, the Navy invests in you when you come ashore about every 2 or 3 years. So the first time I came ashore, they sent me off to Harvard University to get a doctorate in economics as well as national security, so that they could then, every 2 or 3 years, as I set foot on soil again, send me off to a policy position, such as working for President Clinton in the White House as his director of defense policy. But when I came home from that war, I had to stand in a military hospital with my wife as they rolled my daughter out, 4 years old, with malignant brain cancer. They couldn't get it, they said. And when asked, they said, we think it's glioblastoma, what John McCain had. Only 8% of kids have ever survived, and she's one of them. We were able to take her where we had to save her life. No, you saved her life. I had a health care plan in the military that I could do and take her anywhere, up to Massachusetts for proton beam therapy, where there were only 2 machines in the nation at the time. And we got to get to it. She's here because of this country. So my payback to her was to stop being an independent, go back home and become a Democrat in a nearly 2-to-1 Republican district, to become the second Democrat since the Civil War. And I ran. I ran on one campaign refrain. I'm a retired Navy admiral, running on national security that begins at home in health security. I took what's now in 2005, back then, what's now called Romney Care, stuck it, which became, the legacy which turned into Obamacare. I put that up and said, that's what I'm running on. And then, over those next 2 years, with an F from the National Rifle Association, 100% from NARAL Pro-Choice, 100% from National Organization of Women, and 95% from Human Rights Campaign, I got reelected. But the surprise was, by 20 points, I raised $3 million to run again, and I didn't spend a penny, not 1 cent, on a campaign ad. We learned where we could agree, but we also knew that when we disagreed, we would disagree well. I got out of government after those 4 years, which I might come back to, as I ran against my party's desires in a Senate race. Well, I guess I won't come back to it, I'll say it now. Because Arlen Specter, some of you may remember him, a Republican senator, the one who had tried to humiliate Anita Hill when she had brought her sexual harassment claims against now Supreme Court Clarence Thomas. I put out a video and said, he doesn't belong in our party. So I ran against my president's very fine president and all the establishments. Today, with the Me Too generation, that wouldn't have occurred. But back then, I was 40 points down, and the people of Pennsylvania, Republican and Democrats, agreed, and I won. But it came at a cost. With little support in the general election, I did go home. But I was very fortunate, because my daughter's brain cancer came back last year. She's probably the only one they know of who has beat an 8% chance to win twice. Yeah. It was June, we finally decided she was in a safe harbor. And during that time, I sat with her, again at that same proton beam therapy machine in Massachusetts. The same surgeon came out of retirement to do her brain surgery. I had to pay back my country a second time. And I'm not kidding. It won't matter. Because 85% of the damage from greenhouse emissions comes from abroad. The tropics has 8% air conditioning today. In 2050, it'll have 50% of them will have air conditioning. That will be equivalent to deforesting 2/3 of the Amazon, unless We actually take the Kigali Amendment, which we haven't even ratified, which says, hey, hydrofluorocarbon, 6,000 times worse for each molecule that gets released and one CO2 molecule gets released. All nations must enforce it immediately because it doesn't even have to begin to be followed until 2038 by developing countries who are going to buy all this air conditioning. How can you blame them, though? One half of their food rots away because of the lack of air conditioning. And vaccines, one-fourth of them go away. Saudi Arabia will use as much energy to power its air conditioning in 10 years as it exports in oil today. But more than that, as I end to take your questions, we actually have to have somebody who was not like those Democrats and Republicans who voted for that tragic misadventure in Iraq, who never understood that militaries can stop a problem, they can never fix a problem. We unleashed Shia against Sunni and Sunni against Shia. And then former General Saddam Hussein created ISIS. And as it metastasized, it took us to the Middle East and beyond. Our invasion created that condition. If you have somebody in that White House who doesn't understand that you better know how a war is going to end before you start to think about using our military, before you start to think it's wise to begin. Take Iran today. We had fixed Iran with the power of convening the world, even with strange bedfellows. Russia and China, with our diplomacy and our economic sanctions, and rid out of Iran their nuclear weapons making capability that in 2 months they would have had 2 nuclear devices. And now, America broke its word. I know here at home, politicians do that. But abroad, why do you think Iran, when we put more sanctions on it after breaking our word and they kept theirs, they're doing the rest of mischief now, today? Imagine a strike. Can anybody here tell you how it's going to end? Particularly when our aircraft carriers can't even survive in the Persian Gulf. Mr. Trump doesn't know that, nor do Democrats. They haven't operated there. I have. We can't find their 19 mini submarines. Our sonar doesn't work there. We'll have to get the heck out of Dodge before they mine us into the Persian Gulf with their fishing vessels, actually. I will end because what I will tell one story. Since half of you heard one of them, I'll tell the other. When I arrived off Afghanistan that first time, after coming out, I launched 8 pilots. 7 of them were pros from Dover. They'd been in combat before in the first Gulf War. I wanted that first strike to go down well, but with them, I funneled in what we call a nugget, someone who's never been into a foreign country in combat before. When I joined up during the Vietnam era, we didn't have women on ships, never mind flying the most advanced fighter F-18. And she proved to be the one that night that disobeyed my orders, not to dive low without permission. Because we knew the Stinger missiles were there, that we had given the Mujahideen when they were fighting the Soviet Union in Afghanistan. They just relabeled themselves, and they were now called the Taliban. But 8 special forces got ambushed. 4 had died immediately. The other 4 called up and said, we don't have time. They're too close. No lasers. Somebody, just strafe. Some of those men asked for permission. That young woman, brand new pilot, felt she didn't have time to ask. She dove 3 times at 0200 in the morning. And if you've ever been in an F-18 or F-14 and going like this in the dark, wow. And she strafed. And those 4 men, as I told Sean Hannity one time when I was on his show, and he asked me, what do you think about women in combat? I said, those 4 men picked up their dead, Sean, and they didn't care who saved their butt that night. 2 lessons. 1, because she was given a fair, equal opportunity, as too many marginalized communities are not being given, like LGBTQs, where I just met with 20 of them in a bullying conference, are not given a fair, equal opportunity. But because she was the common mission, the common good, the common effort of the United States of America that has succeeded that night. And then the most important lesson, she was willing to be accountable to people, to the troops, above party, that is my orders, above self, risking her career, if not her life, because she knew that it wasn't her word, it was her deed that mattered to the people down below. America is yearning for someone who will be accountable to them, that they will know they can trust, even when they disagree well, because no matter the consequences to that person, he will always be accountable to people, above self, above party, above any special interest, no matter the cost. How else can we ever get health care, ever get training for a lifetime, my favorite program, I hope I'm asked to, through a Congress where we don't have another president who can only do executive orders? We can't keep going sideways. We must unite this country. Thank you. I could tell you about training for a lifetime. Is there a question, please? Was I that boring?
One over here.
Yes, sir.
Can you share your opinion on the best end for the war in Afghanistan?
Yes, can I share my opinion for the best end for the war in Afghanistan? Absolutely. The president did the right thing to engage with the Taliban. But what he should have done is brought in the Afghan government immediately, as well as Pakistan, because Pakistan does mischief by fueling the Taliban. And then he should have brought in India, that doesn't like Pakistan, as you well know, and they help the government. And then he should bring in China, that's putting its Belt and Road Initiative right through Afghanistan. And then he should bring in Iran. They don't like Al-Qaeda, Shia, Sunni. Because we have to get to a peace accord. But if all those outside players playing mischief aren't part of owning the suitcase of peace, that thing's going to pop right on open when we back out, when we only have the Taliban and the government there. Because, for one example, India and Pakistan are going to cause mischief because they want their team to win after we're gone. So you must bring everybody in. Convene the world. That's the greatest power of America. Not our military, not our economy. It's our power to convene. And so what we need to do, like we did with Iran, we convene strange bedfellows, China and Russia and others, to kick out that stuff. We convene them all. It's tough. That's what diplomacy is. It should hurt. A lot of hard work. And then we make sure there's a comfortable peace accord that can be enforced with one pertinent stipulation: the human rights and the civil rights of women. I say that because when I was on the ground in Afghanistan, I came out and I said, man, we fixed the illiteracy rate of women in Afghanistan, which was 98% when I was there. We do more to fix the global war terror than our military will do, and now I can say, has been able to do to stop it after 19 courageous years of trying to. Military stop problems, we don't fix them. I also said that because after I left Congress, I didn't take a lobbying job as 450 congressmen and senators did. Offered a 7-figure job, literally, because I was an Admiral Congressman. My wife put her hand on my shoulder and said, when I turned it down, "Are you sure?" I think she was joking. But I went and convened the world, 158 nations, every one of Mr. Trump's travel ban list. I brought one high school team, including an all-girls Afghanistan Muslim team. And at Constitution Hall across the street from the White House, I had them lead the parade of the very first international robotics competition. When they had a picture taken with a boy, they went back and the mullah condemned them. After all this time, we cannot leave that society. We have to cut their army in half. We have to cut their police in half, because half of them are corrupt. And leave the competent ones there and make it right. Tough business? Yeah. I don't think this president knows how to do that. Question? Yes, ma'am.
I am interested in what it sounds like your Training for Life program. I'm a
Yes.
county supervisor.
You're what supervisor?
Pardon?
You're what kind of supervisor?
County supervisor.
Yes, yes, yes.
And I spent 8 hours last week, not counting drive time, in training to fix our administration, the state's administration of a federal workforce program.
Ah.
So I'd like to to hear it.
Yes, here's what I believe. Look, can we fix, first of all, let me take student loans. Can we fix student loans? Oh my gosh, yes. 2% of youth that have graduated from college since 2005, only 2%, have a debt of greater than $50,000. We can fix that problem. 75% of them have it $10,000 or less. Before we say we forgive it all, and the blue-collar worker pays for it in debt, what we have to say is there's a program in government that says, and we should make it universal, mandatory, and grandfather it for everybody, you don't have to pay back more than 10% of your loan. 10%, of your income towards your loan each year. We should lower that to 5%, and for lower income, forgive it after 20 years of pay. So if you don't earn anything, you don't pay anything back until you get another job. We can fix that problem by training for a lifetime. As I went around, I've driven 17,000 miles. I've lived in a condo lodge here in Iowa for 77 of the last 90 days. Driven 17,000 miles, 235 events. Man, I've seen it all. It's beautiful. Particular cornfields. I've never seen such straight cornfields. No, it's just like the sheriff said up there. I mean, he was talking about a sailor drinking. In Pennsylvania, they're like sailors walking. Do you know what I mean? Here, it's like the army, straight across. I met a precision agronomist. I said, what's that? He said, well, I'm the one who makes those cornfields straight. Well, so why do they need you anymore? He says, because we're soon going to have, and I'm making sure they have them, wireless tractors. What happens, I said to her, with the drivers? They lose their job. As I walked 422 miles across Pennsylvania, from the Jersey border all the way to the Ohio border, when I ran for Senate, because I wanted people to know it's about you, not me. I got to know you. I met a coal miner who lost his job as we go to natural gas at that time, now green energy. What happened to him? What we don't have here is training for the artisans, those who use their hands and their brain. As technology changes so rapidly, we spend less than any developed nation on training for the artisans. There's 65% of Americans who don't have a college degree who really run this country. We should be training and retraining. That's what we do in the military. You lose your job because the F-15 goes out of business, what do we do with you? We don't kick you out. We put a lot of investment in you already. Just like that driver of that truck, or just like that mine worker. He should be retrained for green energy manufacturing. But you know what? In the military, we just sent them off to the Air Force Community College, the largest community college in the nation. And they're retrained in 4 to 6 months, and they're out in a better work in the F-22. I proposed this in 2015 in a book. I've only sold about 6 copies. But it's what we have to do. There are people. Those are the Trump supporters. Those are the Clinton supporters. The Democratic Party should be focused on them. Everybody says we have low employment today. No. The labor participation rate today is 63%. Back in the Clinton years, what didn't you like? The peace of the prosperity. It was 67%. That means 12 million Americans are out of the workforce, not even looking for a job because they don't have the skills to get one. I know, I've met them. That's what I mean. And there's various ways to do that. I set aside $200 billion for that, paid for, in order to make it happen. Yes, sir.
Just go ahead and speak about immigration for a minute.
Yes. Immigration. First thing I do if I was president at this moment, there's something in government called the National Strategy Mass Program, the National Mass Strategy Program, where when we have refugees in America, like we do today crossing the border, but when we have refugees from hurricanes, FEMA, with Red Cross and the other nonprofits, immediately respond. And we should have them, not ICE, taking care of families and children, because that's how they're trained to do. And they only need to take care of them until we get them into housing with families that are already here, relatives, or with volunteers. Second, let's do, as I said, we did military stop problems. They don't fix them. How did we do in World War II? Military stopped Germany. We fixed fascism with the Marshall Aid Plan. That's what we need to do in the Northern Triangle. We've got to go to those 3 countries and put that money in there. Any woman, though, I'll tell you, who's willing to walk 800 miles carrying her baby knowing she might be raped or that child abused, that's the kind I want to hear. That bravery, that determination, but we can fix that problem. We've already done it to one country, and then we walked away. Third, man, I run in every parade. Been in 13 parades here in Iowa. Shook 30,000 hands because I learned a lot about Iowa. Man, they love their parades. As I called one woman and I said, how many will be along the route? She said, well, I think there'll be more than usual. We haven't had a parade for the last 4 weeks. No, that's a true story. So I'm coming back, going to church, taking hands, and someone says, every 1 out of 4 said, stood up, will stand up or shake your hand and say, thank you for your service. But one of them, after she said that, says, but I like my wall. And I said, ma'am, I also believe that we should secure our borders. But I also got to secure our economy. Because since 1970, the birth rate in America has not been sufficient to replace those who pass away every year. And I said, ma'am, the baby boomer generation is retiring. I know, I'm trying to keep a job. But I said, if it wasn't for the undocumented as well as documented, we'd be in a population death spiral. Just like Japan that has no immigration. And it stagnated its economy 2.5 years. We need them. I said, ma'am, we just need them. And so we need to do what John McCain, Ted Kennedy, President Bush all proposed was a bipartisan plan. And we all know what that one is. They come out of the shadows, they get back to the line, they're back in line, they go through background checks, crime, all that kind of stuff. But they get there. And man, they're magnified damn workers. Is that okay? Yes, sir.
What about the prospects for unions in the United States?
Yeah, what are the prospects for union? It's pretty tough. 9%. And when you take out those that are government, I think you're down about 7%, correct? Here's why I'm for unions. One reason. Not for unions. I'm for unions because in the AFL-CIO charter it says, we stand for working families. I'm for unions because of the last organized force for working families here in America. And we have to do it. Why? Well, as I went around those 17,000 miles, I went up to the GE plant in, gosh, forgotten the county. It's now an ABB plant. I met a U.S. Marine Corps vet. He started working there at a wage, 1990. It was sold, and lots of loans were given to it and grants by government here in Iowa, and the entry wage is still the exact same as it was in 1990. I went to see where John Lewis was born. Beardsfield, I think it was. The great Union leader. You're the birthplace of him. He roared in the 30s and the 40s and the 50s. There was no better Union leader than him. He put them on the map. He wouldn't accept that today. That's kind of what I think of unions. It doesn't mean, I have a 97% voting record with them, but that doesn't mean I always have to agree with them, but by and large, when you have OSHA that has not done one significant change since 1970 to health safety laws, and we have, I think it's, I'm going to be a little off statistic, I haven't read it for a while, I think it was 5,000 people died on the job last year. And if you work in a popcorn factory, you know, making that microwave, as somebody said, it's like inhaling acid. And we don't even though I tried in Congress to get something through, we don't do it. That's what unions stand up for, their workers and all. Question, Les? I've gone on too long? I have, nope, okay. Okay, if I could end, I just want to say is, first of all, I got to always remember those wise words I brought up John McCain's name with you. And POWMIA Day was just a little bit ago. If I could, on his, Sheriff, can I have 2 more minutes? Okay, great. She shouldn't have said take my time. But the issue is that my wife actually works in various things, VA studies for suicide, and but one time she had to help out in POWs and MIAs. And so she going through, because she went to Middlebury and learned some Russian and all, crawling through archives in the Ukraine, the former Soviet Union. And trying to find out where we lost some POWs when the regiments from the Ukraine, which used to be part of the Soviet Union, and Putin's trying to make that so today, he's already annexed part of it, well, Russia, and shot down U.S. pilots over northern North Korea. And after 3 or 4 days of combing through those records, this exasperated former Soviet Union general said to her, "Why do you Americans care?" I'll never forget that. And I tell everybody, We are respected around this world for the power of our economy, for the power of our military, but we are admired for the power of that ideals. And we had presidents, from John F. Kennedy to Ronald Reagan, that understood that after World War II, the world's greatest generation had lit the flame of justice in an international rules-based world order, based upon our democratic values of open and fair governments, fair markets, and individual and human rights, even for those Muslim Afghanistan girls. And we kept that flame of justice burning brightly and won the Third World War after they came from home from the Second, and won that Third Cold War without a shot, as we brought extreme poverty from 85% of the world's population to 8% today. As we brought around this world, imperfect as we did it at times with mistakes like Iraq, we brought the literacy rate from 40% of the world's population up to 85%. And now we're walking back home. We forget who we are when we are united together. And I forget what I should do when I forget the wise words of John McCain. When he called me, as I used to be in the Senate race, because he was a fellow Naval Academy graduate. And one of his calls came in, had John McCain on in his cell, I picked it up, said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Joe, saw you on television. You're still too long. Keep it shorter." Thank you very much.